A long time ago, the only way to record music in a music studio would be to a tape machine. And again, those tape machines would be multi-channel tape machines. So you could record multiple inputs onto it, and when playing back that tape, it would play back multiple channels at once. Of course, all of that got mixed down to a 2-channel tape, and then you would have your master recording. Now, a lot of music over the years has been recorded to a tape. Hence, we deeply recognize that sound as something really pleasant and, most importantly, familiar. As a result of that, we have a lot of plugins that emulate tape machines. They actually emulate what it would sound like if your input was recorded to a tape and then played back from a tape. Of course, these emulations today, they have really nice visual displays of what a tape should look like. And they cover not only emulation of one tape machine because they used to sound differently. There are many factors that influence how a tape machine sounds, and, from a chemical compound on the actual tape to the quality of its, heads that record and reproduce that sound. There were a lot of factors that influenced what a tape machine would sound like. Of course, it also had preamps, transformers, many things that physically affected the way that tape machine sounded. In a tape machine emulation like this one, we have a couple of those, as they would call it, formulas that emulate different sounding tapes. Some of them create more saturation in certain parts of the spectrum. Some of them create less saturation, are more transparent. They also emulate what a tape machine would sound like when played back slowly. So it means that if you played it slower when recording and also played it slower when playing back, it would be different than playing it faster in both cases, because more tape per second would capture the high frequencies differently and with more precision. So let's go through some of these tape emulations and show you what that would sound like. Now, I placed these on the master track. You could use them and should use them maybe on separate tracks or on buses. And today we'll just use it on a master track just to show you what they sound like and what they emulate. So inherently, a tape machine will add saturation, meaning it will add harmonics to the sound. Plus, at some point, if you overload it, it will be saturated enough to cut off the high transient peaks of a signal. That was one of the traits of recording to tape. One thing we have to be careful when, going through a tape machine emulation is how hot we are going into the tape machine. So that means that we need to look at this input meter and we need to see how hot are we feeding the tape machine. If we go in with a loud enough signal, it will also distort and saturate. So this tape machine has been emulated in such a way that the input level also matters. The amount of distortion, or let's say saturation, that you're going to get is connected to the input level. So let's try it. Let's play a piece of this song. And I'll raise the input. And you can see that it's connected to the output, meaning that as I raise the input, the output goes down. So with a tape machine, I'd like to stay close to zero, especially when, a master channel is involved, when I'm actually feeding my entire track through it. And I think this would be a good measure. Being close to zero is good enough. I could feed it much hotter. Let's see what that sounds like. That's already distorting. You can see that it's cutting off all the transients. It's distorting a lot. But you see, there is something pleasant about it. So if I just let me just bypass it, just like that. No tape, tape. You see, it's cutting off some of the transient information not being there. It's making it more warm. It's making it less harsh. That's a definite. So it does apply a kind of a EQ curve to the whole signal, and also it's applying the saturation to some of the parts unevenly. I guess it's feeding some of the frequencies hotter into the saturation, and then when coming back, it's compensating for it. The main thing to get out of this is that we can actually emulate recording to a tape and then playing back the signal from it. As I said in the beginning, why would you want to do that? Well, it sounds familiar. It adds saturation and warmth. And by warmth, I mean, cutting off some of the transients of the high frequencies as well, making it less harsh. But more importantly, it needs to sound better to you. So if it's not the right thing to do, if it doesn't sound good, you should avoid it. As anything in music production, it can always be a thing to try out. Many of the, common things that are done today as like tricks that we use on certain equipment were done by somebody experimenting. So, I was always encourage you experiment. But if it doesn't sound good, it doesn't. And you shouldn't use a tape machine because, everybody else does or somebody you saw does. Try it out, see if you like the way it sounds. Now, what this tape machine does, as I said, provides a couple of different formulas for, the tape, the kind of saturation it's applying and where. You can read all about it more deeper in the manual if you want to. As I said, the speed is going to affect how those high frequencies are being recorded. So let's listen to the difference in that. With the 15 IPS, that's 15 inches per second, 15 inches of tape pass over the recording and playback head every second, or 7.5. That's half the speed. Yeah, so let's see at half the speed. I'm just going to compare these two for you. Quite different. You can see that the whole frequency response changes when changing the speed. Now, the bias right here, it's an emulation for a really high frequency signal that used to be added to every recording that goes onto a tape. That high frequency signal was really outside, higher and outside of our range of hearing. So it was just added there so that, the tape would capture the signal we're giving it as best as possible, because low level signals are not really good for recording to a tape. So we would add that bias signal so that the overall amplitude of the entire signal we're feeding it is higher and better for recording to a tape. Now, what this tape machine also emulates, it can do some tape delay effects, it can do wow and flutter, and that is basically some of the mechanical fallbacks of, tape machines, being that these motors moving the tape, rolling the tape over the heads were not always perfect with the speed. So when they would, speed up or slow down, you would have a wow effect, meaning it would kind of be like an LFO, low frequency LFO on the frequency. Okay, so the song would kind of speed up and slow down, but just a tiny bit, because those motors were not perfect. And the same thing with the flutter. It would happen because of the way how the tape is going over the head. So some really fast tremors. And again, that just sounds like a faster LFO affecting the pitch of the song, speeding it up and slowing it down, but really fast, and of course in small increments. It would just add to the authenticity of the tape machine emulation. Now we can also add some noise, and that's just there to, add noise because tape machines added noise. I really don't prefer to have that. Now, we are in a digital age, so if you really want that for authenticity, to sound like you're, coming from a tape machine, go ahead and do it. I really prefer it to be noiseless. It's really easy to add noise, but it's sometimes really hard to take it out of a recording. And of course, this saturation is something that's added on top of everything. So as I mentioned before, the harder we feed the signal, so the hotter and the higher the level of the signal we're feeding into the tape machine, we're getting more saturation, as you've seen, but we can add additional level, of saturation on top of that. So this is a different, saturation engine altogether, added on top of all of that also. And we have the settings for that delay that we can cause. So pretty much it kind of is straightforward, and mostly when you're dealing with something like this, with an emulation of tape machine, just follow the input signal, try out some of the settings, and see what works for you. For mastering of an electronic music track like the one I'm using here in this example, I would try to be as transparent as possible. But if you were going with some lo-fi sound or some, jazz or anything that sounds older, well, you might want to make the tape machine also give you that kind of a vibe, that kind of a flavor and coloring. So you would use maybe a 7.5-inch speed and maybe an older sounding, formula for this tape machine. So all in all, this is a really an all-round nice emulation for a tape machine you could use on your recordings. And I just wanted to show you something else that we have here as well. Let's say Saturn. If we were to look at the Saturn, we do have some tape emulations too. And those also emulate different tapes. So each one of these is going to give you a different tape model. Basically, it will apply different kinds of harmonics. It will also apply a different kind of an EQ curve on top of everything, a different kind of a transfer curve. So all in all, different tape emulations that you could choose from. Choose how much drive you wanted. Although you could set the drive, many other parameters. You also have a, mix of dry, wet. So you could really oversaturate it and just mix in some of that signal with the, with the dry. So you could do any of that. The point is, choose that with your ears. It can be a really nice effect. It can be really subtle. It can be really, over the top. Sometimes even that works. And you would use the tape to emulate a tape machine or the kinds of saturation or harmonics that the tape would introduce into your sound. This is why we have those emulations. This is why we use them. Now, they might sound really good on individual sounds. They might sound really good on groups, okay, like buses, just like that, and also on the master track. Try them out. As I said, aside of adding saturation, they also do cut off some of the peaks and the transients, and sometimes that's really desirable.